The millionaire noticed something strange. While everyone panicked during the robbery, the waitress stood calm, fearless. What happened next revealed she was no ordinary girl. Before we continue, I have to be straightforward. If you don't subscribe now, this might be the last time you see our content. The digital world can separate us unless you follow, comment, and share this video. Don't miss the chance to be part of our growing family. Now, let's delve into today's narrative. Alexander Thornfield adjusted his platinum Rolex as he surveyed the elegant dining room of Le Bernardin, his latest acquisition in Manhattan's restaurant empire. At 33, he'd built a hospitality conglomerate worth $3 billion, and tonight's inspection of his newest property was just another routine business matter. The Michelin-starred establishment hummed with quiet efficiency, crystal glasses catching the warm amber light from handcrafted chandeliers. "Everything appears to be running smoothly, Mr. Thornfield," his assistant whispered, but Alexander barely heard her. His attention had been captured by a young woman moving between tables with an unusual grace. Unlike the other servers who seemed nervous in his presence, this one carried herself with quiet confidence, her long black hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, revealing delicate Asian features and eyes that seemed to miss nothing. Maya Chen had noticed the intimidating man in the $1,000 suit the moment he'd entered with his entourage. She'd worked at Le Bernardin for 6 months, long enough to recognize when the owner was conducting one of his surprise visits. The other servers whispered nervously about Alexander Thornfield's reputation for perfectionism and his habit of firing people on the spot for minor infractions. But Maya had survived worse than demanding bosses. She'd learned long ago that keeping her head down and doing her job well was the key to staying invisible. "Excuse me." Alexander's voice cut through her thoughts as she balanced a tray of wine glasses. "You're handling those glasses like you've been doing this for years, but you don't move like someone who's been waiting tables her whole life." Maya paused, meeting his piercing blue eyes with steady dark ones. "I move like someone who needs this job, Mr. Thornfield. Is there something specific you need?" The directness of her response surprised him. Most employees either fawned over him or cowered in fear. This young woman did neither. "What's your name?" "Maya Chen, sir. I work the evening shift, table sections 12 through 18. How long have you been with us?" 6 months, 2 weeks, 3 days. The precision of her answer made him raise an eyebrow. "I pay attention to details, Mr. Thornfield. It's important in this line of work." Before Alexander could respond, the front door burst open with explosive force. 3 men in dark hoodies stormed into the restaurant, their faces partially concealed and their intentions immediately clear when one shouted, "Everyone on the ground, now!" Chaos erupted instantly. Diners screamed and dove under tables. Expensive glassware shattered against marble floors and servers dropped their trays in panic. Alexander's security detail started to move, but they were positioned near the kitchen entrance, too far away to be immediately effective. Wallets, phones, jewelry, everything valuable in the bag. The leader, a man with dead eyes and a scar running down his left cheek, waved a pistol menacingly. "Any heroes tonight and people start dying?" Alexander watched in fascination as Maya's entire demeanor shifted. While everyone else displayed various stages of terror, she became perfectly still, her breathing controlled, and her eyes tracking each gunman's position with mathematical precision. She'd moved slightly behind a marble pillar, partially concealed but with clear sight lines to all 3 assailants. "You pretty lady with the ponytail," the scarred leader called out, pointing his weapon directly at Maya. "Start collecting from these rich folks. Move." Maya stepped forward with her hands visible, but Alexander noticed something the gunman missed: her stance. Her feet were positioned in a way that suggested coiled energy, like a spring ready to release. Her center of gravity was lower than normal, and her breathing remained impossibly steady. "Of course," Maya said calmly, approaching the nearest table where an elderly couple sat trembling. "Just please don't hurt anyone." The gunman relaxed slightly, thinking he'd found a compliant helper. That was his first and last mistake. Maya moved with fluid precision that defied physics. In one seamless motion, she grabbed the edge of a marble-topped side table and spun it toward the leader, while simultaneously dropping low and sweeping the legs of the second gunman. The heavy table caught the leader in the midsection, sending him crashing into an ornate wine display. Before the third gunman could react, Maya had rolled behind the bar and launched herself over it in a spectacular aerial maneuver. Her foot connected with his wrist, sending his weapon flying, while her elbow found his solar plexus with surgical accuracy. He crumpled instantly. The second gunman tried to scramble for his dropped weapon, but Maya was already there. She delivered a precise strike to a pressure point on his neck, and he joined his accomplice in unconsciousness. The entire encounter had lasted less than 30 seconds. The restaurant fell into stunned silence. Maya straightened her uniform, checked her ponytail, and looked around at the debris with genuine concern. "I'm sorry about the mess," she said to Alexander, who stood frozen in amazement. "I know this will require extensive cleanup. Are you seriously apologizing for saving everyone's lives?" Alexander found his voice, though it came out rougher than intended. "I'm apologizing for the property damage," Maya replied, her professional mask sliding back into place. "The insurance paperwork alone will be a nightmare." Police sirens wailed in the distance as Alexander's security team finally reached them, looking sheepish and unnecessary. Alexander couldn't take his eyes off Maya, who was now helping the elderly couple back to their feet with gentle reassurance. "Where exactly did you learn to fight like that?" he asked, approaching her carefully. Maya's expression became guarded instantly. "YouTube videos," she said flatly. "Amazing what you can learn online these days." Alexander almost laughed at the obvious lie, but something in her eyes warned him away from pushing. "Right, YouTube." Mr. Thornfield, one of his security guards, interrupted. "The police want statements from everyone." "Should we?" "Handle it," Alexander said without looking away from Maya. "Make sure they know Ms. Chen is a hero, not a suspect." "I'm not a hero," Maya said quietly. "I'm just someone who reacts quickly in dangerous situations. It's not complicated." But it was complicated, Alexander realized. Everything about this woman was complicated. The way she moved suggested years of intensive training. Her situational awareness was military level. Her calm under pressure indicated experience with violence that no 22-year-old waitress should possess. "Have dinner with me," he said suddenly. Maya blinked in surprise. "Excuse me?" "Tomorrow night. Somewhere quiet, where we can talk without interruption. I'd like to know more about you, Mr. Thornfield. I don't think that's appropriate. You're my boss." "Actually, I'm your boss's boss's boss," Alexander said with a slight smile. "Which makes it even more inappropriate, but I'm asking anyway." "Why?" The simple question caught him off guard. Why was he asking? Because she intrigued him in ways he couldn't define. Because watching her fight had been the most exciting 30 seconds of his privileged life. Because she looked at him like he was just a man instead of a bank account with legs. Because in 33 years of living, I've never met anyone like you, he said honestly. Maya studied his face for a long moment, searching for signs of deception or hidden agenda. "I don't date customers, employers, or men who think they can collect interesting people like trophies." "Which category do I fall into?" "All three." Alexander laughed despite the rejection. "Fair enough, but what if I wasn't your employer?" "You'd still be a customer who thinks I'm some kind of trophy." "And if I promised not to treat you like a trophy?" Maya shook her head. "Mr. Thornfield, we live in completely different worlds. You own restaurants. I clean tables. You wear suits that cost more than my rent. I shop at thrift stores. You collect art. I collect tips. The math doesn't work. Math can be wrong. Not this kind of math." Alexander found himself genuinely frustrated for the first time in years. He was accustomed to getting what he wanted through charm, persistence, or simply writing checks. Maya Chen wasn't impressed by any of his usual tactics. "What would it take?" he asked. "For what?" "For you to have dinner with me." Maya was quiet for so long he thought she might ignore the question entirely. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer, but no less determined. "It would take you being someone completely different than who you are, Mr. Thornfield. And since that's impossible, I suggest we both accept reality and move on." She walked away before he could respond, leaving Alexander standing among the broken glass and unconscious criminals. wondering why rejection from a waitress felt like the most significant thing that had happened to him in years. 3 days after the incident at Le Bernardin, Alexander found himself doing something unprecedented. Sitting in the employee break room of his own restaurant at 7 in the morning, nursing a cup of terrible coffee and pretending to review inventory reports. In reality, he was waiting for Maya's shift to begin so he could observe her in her natural environment. What he discovered challenged every assumption he'd made about her background. Maya arrived precisely 15 minutes before her shift, changed into her uniform with military efficiency, and immediately began reviewing the evening's reservations with a focus that bordered on academic. Alexander watched from the kitchen service window as she memorized not just table numbers and guest preferences, but dietary restrictions, anniversary dates, and even the preferred wine selections of regular customers. She's something else, isn't she? Alexander turned to find Henri Dubois, Le Bernardin's head chef, standing beside him with a knowing expression. What do you mean? Maya. That's who you're watching, yes? I've been cooking for 30 years, Monsieur Thornfield, and I recognize precision when I see it. That girl approaches serving tables like a master chess player approaches a tournament. Alexander frowned. Chess player? She thinks 6 moves ahead. Watch her tonight during service. She anticipates needs before guests realize they have them. She knows which tables will order dessert based on their appetizer choices. She can predict when someone will need their wine glass refilled by their conversation patterns. It's remarkable. You think she's overqualified for this job? Henri laughed softly. I think she's overqualified for this planet. But whatever brought her here, she works harder than anyone else and never complains. The other servers respect her because she makes their jobs easier. As if summoned by their conversation, Maya appeared in the kitchen doorway. She moved with the same economical grace Alexander had noticed during the robbery, carrying herself like someone who owned every inch of space around her. Chef Dubois, I noticed Table 7 has dietary restrictions that aren't listed in our system. The reservation notes mention shellfish allergies, but the guest also mentioned avoiding gluten during their last visit. Should I flag this for tonight's service? Of course, thank you for catching that. Maya nodded and started to leave, but Henry called her back. Maya, have you met our owner, Mr. Thornfield? She turned, and Alexander saw the exact moment she spotted him. Her expression didn't change, but something shifted in her posture, a subtle defensive positioning that suggested she viewed him as a potential threat. We've met, she said carefully. Mr. Thornfield, is there something you need regarding tonight's service? Actually, yes. I'd like to discuss your background with the company. Your employment file seems unusually sparse. Maya's eyes narrowed slightly. I provided all required documentation when I was hired. You provided the minimum required documentation. Most employees include references, previous work experience, educational background. Your file contains a driver's license, social security card, and nothing else. Is there a problem with my work performance? Quite the opposite. Your work is exceptional, which makes your minimal background even more intriguing. Henri sensed the tension and quietly excused himself, leaving them alone in the kitchen. Maya remained perfectly still, but Alexander noticed her hands had unconsciously moved to a defensive position at her sides. Mr. Thornfield, I do my job well. I'm punctual, professional, and I don't cause problems. In most places, that's enough. This isn't most places. This is a 3-Michelin-star establishment where every employee undergoes extensive background screening. Then perhaps you should have screened me more thoroughly before hiring me. Alexander found himself smiling despite the obvious rebuff. You're doing it again. Doing what? Turning the conversation back on me instead of answering questions about yourself. It's a sophisticated deflection technique. Or maybe I just value my privacy. Privacy is one thing, mystery is another. The way you fought those men required years of professional training. Your knowledge of wine service suggests formal sommelier education. Your intuitive understanding of fine dining protocols indicates experience in establishments far above this level. And yet you work here as a server, live in a studio apartment in Queens, and act like you've never been anywhere or done anything interesting. Maya was quiet for a long moment, studying his face with those dark, unreadable eyes. "You've been investigating me. I've been trying to understand you. There's a difference?" "I think so. One comes from suspicion, the other from curiosity." "And which is this?" Alexander considered the question seriously. "Honestly? Both. The way you handled those gunmen was impressive but concerning. That level of skill doesn't come from casual self-defense classes. Maybe I'm just naturally coordinated, and maybe I'm naturally humble." We both know that's not true. Despite herself, Maya's lips quirked upward in what might have been the beginning of a smile. "You're asking me to trust you with personal information, but what exactly have you done to earn that trust?" "Fair point. What would it take? For starters, stop investigating my background. If you want to know something about me, ask me directly." "All right. Maya Chen, where did you learn to fight like that?" "My grandfather taught me." "Next question. Where?" "San Francisco's Chinatown next." "Why did you leave?" The almost smile disappeared entirely. "That's not a fair question." "Why isn't it fair?" "Because you're not ready for that answer, and I'm not ready to give it." Alexander felt himself being drawn deeper into the puzzle that was Maya Chen. Every answer she gave raised 3 new questions, and every defensive response made him more determined to understand what she was protecting herself from. "Have dinner with me tonight after service," then he said again. "Mr. Thornfield. Alex, just Alex, and not as your employer, as someone who finds you fascinating and wants to know more. Why is this so important to you?" The question stopped him cold. Why was it important? He'd dated models, actresses, heiresses, and brilliant businesswomen without feeling this level of compelling interest. What was it about Maya that made him want to break through her defenses? "Because I've spent my entire adult life surrounded by people who want something from me," he said finally. "Money, connections, social status, business opportunities. But you don't want anything. You actively discourage my interest. In my world, that's so rare it's practically extinct. Maybe I don't want anything because I've learned that everything comes with a price. What if it doesn't? Everything does, Alex. The question is whether you're willing to pay it when the bill comes due." Before he could respond, Maya glanced at her watch and straightened her uniform. "I need to start my shift, if you'll excuse me." She walked away, leaving Alexander standing in the kitchen with the uncomfortable realization that he was pursuing someone who might be running from something far more serious than he'd imagined. But instead of deterring him, the thought only made Maya Chen more compelling. As the evening service began, Alexander positioned himself where he could observe Maya without being obvious about it. Henri had been right. She moved through the dining room like a grandmaster playing chess. She anticipated every need, solved problems before they became visible, and somehow managed to make a room full of demanding millionaires feel like they were her only priority. But it was the small details that captured Alexander's attention. The way she held wine bottles suggested formal training in prestigious establishments. Her conversation with a French businessman flowed effortlessly between English and French, with an accent that spoke of education, not just exposure. When an elderly Italian guest became confused about the menu, Maya switched to fluent Italian without missing a beat. Most telling of all was her interaction with a young couple celebrating their anniversary. The woman was clearly nervous, wearing a dress that had probably cost her a month's salary, intimidated by the elegant surroundings. Maya somehow made her feel comfortable without being condescending, recommending wines that complemented their budget while making the experience feel special rather than economical. "She's got 4 tables, 96 covers tonight, and every single guest thinks they're her favorite," Henri observed, appearing beside Alexander again. "That's not just skill, that's artistry. How does someone that talented end up waiting tables? Same way someone with your intelligence ends up buying restaurants instead of running countries, I suppose. Life is complicated, and people make choices for reasons that don't always make sense to outsiders." Alexander watched Maya deliver a perfectly timed dessert to table 12, while simultaneously catching the eye of a guest at table 15, who needed his wine glass refilled. She made it look effortless, but he could see the tremendous concentration required to orchestrate such seamless service. As the evening wound down, Alexander made his decision. He would wait for Maya after her shift ended, not to pressure her into dinner, but to offer something he'd never offered anyone before: complete honesty about why she intrigued him. What he didn't expect was to find her in the alley behind the restaurant at 1 a.m., practicing martial arts forms with deadly precision under the pale glow of security lights. Alexander stood frozen in the doorway, watching Maya move through what appeared to be an advanced kata with breathtaking fluidity. Her work uniform had been replaced by simple black clothing that allowed unrestricted movement, and her hair flowed loose around her shoulders as she executed techniques that were clearly lethal in their precision. She spun, kicked, struck invisible opponents with combinations that would have been devastating against real attackers. This wasn't casual practice. It was the disciplined training of someone maintaining skills that had taken years to develop. Every movement spoke of muscle memory earned through countless hours of repetition. Maya sensed his presence without breaking rhythm, completing her form before turning to face him with calm alertness. "Mr. Thornfield." "Working late?" "Alex," he corrected automatically. "And yes, apparently not as late as some people. I prefer to practice when there's no audience. How's that working out for you?" Despite herself, Maya smiled. "Not well, apparently." Alexander stepped into the alley, noting how Maya's stance subtly shifted to maintain distance while keeping escape routes clear. That was beautiful. Also terrifying, but beautiful. It's just exercise. That was combat training at a level most military units would envy. "Where exactly did your grandfather teach you to move like that?" Maya was quiet for a long moment, studying his face in the dim light. Something in his expression must have convinced her to drop at least one layer of defensive pretense. "My grandfather was Li Wei Chen. He taught traditional kung fu in San Francisco's Chinatown for 40 years. I started training with him when I was 4 years old." Alexander recognized the name immediately. Li Wei Chen had been legendary in martial arts circles, a master who'd trained champions and whose school had produced fighters who dominated international competitions. "Li Wei Chen was your grandfather? The Li Wei Chen? You've heard of him?" "Anyone who's ever studied martial arts has heard of him. He was considered one of the greatest masters of his generation. His school produced more champions than any other institution in North America." Maya's expression became guarded again. "Most people don't know that much about traditional kung fu. I studied Taekwondo in college. Not seriously, but enough to recognize expertise when I see it. Your grandfather was famous for only accepting students who demonstrated exceptional dedication and natural ability. He made exceptions for family. I doubt that. Li Wei Chen was known for being harder on his relatives than anyone else. If he trained you personally, it's because you had extraordinary talent." Maya began gathering her things, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "It was a long time ago." "How long ago did you leave?" The question made her pause. "I didn't leave, I was sent away." "By who?" "My family. When I turned 18, they decided I needed to focus on more practical pursuits. Marriage, specifically. Traditional Chinese families don't always approve of daughters who prefer fighting to finding husbands." Alexander sensed there was much more to the story, but Maya's body language warned him not to push further. Instead, he took a different approach. "Are you hungry?" "What?" "It's 1:30 in the morning, you just finished a 10-hour shift followed by what looked like an hour of intensive training. I'm betting you haven't eaten anything substantial since lunch." "I'm fine. That wasn't the question. Are you hungry?" Maya hesitated. "Yes. I know a place, nothing fancy. Just good food and no dress code required." "Alex." "Not a date, just food. Two people who happen to be hungry at the same time, eating in the same location. No expectations, no agenda." "Why are you being so persistent?" "Because you're the first person I've met in years who challenges me to be more than just rich. You make me want to earn your respect instead of buying it." Maya looked at him for a long moment, weighing something in her mind. "One condition." "Name it." "No more questions about my past tonight. We can talk about anything else, but my personal history is off limits." "Deal." The diner Alex chose was a 24-hour place in Queens that served truck drivers, night shift workers, and insomniacs who needed comfort food at unusual hours. Maya seemed to relax as soon as they walked in. The casual atmosphere and working-class clientele apparently felt safer to her than elegant restaurants filled with people who might have expectations or judgments. They found a booth in the back corner, and Maya ordered pancakes with a side of bacon while Alex requested coffee and pie. She ate with genuine hunger, and Alex found himself fascinated by this glimpse of Maya without her professional mask. "Can I ask about Kung Fu without it counting as personal history?" he ventured. "Depends on the question." "The form you were practicing, what style was it?" "Northern Shaolin with elements of Wing Chun. My grandfather believed in combining traditional techniques with practical applications." "How many hours a day did you train?" "When I was younger, 4 to 6 hours after school, more on weekends. Training wasn't optional in our family." "Do you miss it?" Maya paused with her fork halfway to her mouth. "Miss what?" "Competing. From what I understand, someone with your background would have been eligible for national teams, international competition. I was never interested in competition." "Why not?" "Because Kung Fu isn't a sport. It's a way of life, a philosophy, a means of protecting yourself and others. Turning it into entertainment diminishes its purpose." Alex found himself leaning forward, drawn in by the passion in her voice. "But surely your grandfather would have been proud to see you compete at the highest levels." "My grandfather cared more about character than trophies. He used to say that the most important victories happen when nobody's watching." "Like 3 nights ago in the restaurant." Maya met his eyes directly. Exactly like 3 nights ago. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, and Alex noticed Maya gradually relaxing. Her shoulders lost their defensive tension, and she began to make occasional eye contact instead of constantly scanning for exits. "Your turn," she said eventually. "For what?" "To answer questions. Fair is fair." "What do you want to know?" "Why restaurants? You could have gone into any business, but you chose hospitality." "Why?" Alex considered the question seriously. "Because food brings people together. It's one of the few industries where success depends on making people genuinely happy, rather than just separating them from their money. That's surprisingly idealistic for a billionaire." "You think billionaires can't be idealistic?" "I think it's easier to be idealistic when you can afford the luxury of principles." "That's cynical even for you." Maya shrugged. "Experience teaches cynicism." "What kind of experience?" She gave him a warning look. "That counts as personal history." "Sorry, force of habit." They finished eating as the first hints of dawn began lightening the sky outside. Alex found himself reluctant to end the evening, which had been the most genuinely relaxing conversation he'd had in months. "Can I drive you home?" he offered as they stood to leave. "I can take the subway." "It's 5 a.m. and you live in Queens. Let me drive you." Maya hesitated, then nodded. "Thank you." Alex's car was a modest BMW rather than the Ferrari or Lamborghini Maya had expected. She raised an eyebrow as he opened the passenger door for her. "Not what you were expecting?" "I figured you'd drive something flashier." "I save the flashy cars for when I need to intimidate people. Tonight I just want to get you home safely." During the drive to Maya's neighborhood, they talked about books, movies, and music. Neutral topics that revealed shared interests in classic literature and obscure foreign films. Alex discovered that Maya was far more widely read than her job suggested, with opinions on authors and subjects that indicated formal education well beyond high school. When they reached her building, a converted warehouse in an industrial area that was slowly gentrifying, Maya turned to him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Thank you for dinner, and for not pushing when I asked you not to. Thank you for giving me a chance to prove I'm not completely terrible." "Jury's still out on that," Maya said, but she was smiling. "Can I see you again?" "Alex, not a date, just this. Conversation with someone who doesn't want anything from me except honesty." Maya studied his face in the dim light from the dashboard. "Why is this so important to you?" "Because you're the first person I've met who makes me want to be worthy of their respect." Something shifted in Maya's expression. A brief glimpse of vulnerability before her defenses snapped back into place. "I have to go." She was out of the car before Alex could respond, disappearing into her building without looking back. But as he drove home through the empty streets, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had changed between them. What he didn't know was that Maya was standing at her window, watching his taillights disappear and wondering why a man who could have anyone was so determined to understand someone who'd spent years making herself invisible. And what neither of them realized was that Marcus Webb, Alex's business partner and oldest friend, had been following them since they left the restaurant, taking photographs and making plans that would soon threaten everything they were beginning to build together. V2 mes recente copiar publicar 4. Marcus Webb had been Alexander Thornfield's business partner for 8 years, best friend for 12, and secret enemy for the past 6 months. As he sat in his penthouse office reviewing the photographs his private investigator had taken of Alex and Maya, his jaw tightened with barely controlled rage. Maya Chen wasn't just some waitress who'd caught Alex's attention. She was the granddaughter of Li Wei Chen, the legendary kung fu master whose dojo Marcus had desperately tried to join as a teenager, only to be rejected for lacking the discipline and character Li Wei demanded from his students. The old man had looked right through Marcus, seeing the anger and entitlement that drove him, and had dismissed him with words that still burned 15 years later. "You seek power, not wisdom. Find another teacher." Now Li Wei's granddaughter was threatening to derail the most important business deal of Marcus's career. Webb Industries stood to make $40 million from the sale of Alex's restaurant chain to a consortium of international investors, a deal that would only proceed if Alex remained focused on business rather than getting distracted by romantic entanglements with inappropriate women. Marcus picked up his phone and dialed a number he'd hoped never to use. "It's Webb. I need you to handle a problem." The voice on the other end was cold and professional. "What kind of problem?" "The kind that requires someone to disappear for a while. Permanently, if necessary." While Marcus was making arrangements to destroy her life, Maya was experiencing something she'd thought was impossible: hope. For the first time in 4 years, she'd allowed herself to imagine a future that didn't involve hiding, running, or constantly looking over her shoulder. Working at Le Bernardin had become more than just a job since Alex started visiting regularly. He'd kept his promise not to pressure her about dates, instead finding excuses to be in the restaurant during her shifts. Sometimes he reviewed inventory reports from a corner table. Other times he met with suppliers in the dining room. Always, he treated her with the same respectful professionalism he showed his executives, never using his position to make her uncomfortable. But it was the small gestures that broke down Maya's defenses. The way he remembered she preferred Earl Grey tea over coffee during her breaks. How he'd arranged for the staff parking area to have better lighting after learning she walked to the subway alone after late shifts. The fact that he'd quietly increased security at all his properties following the restaurant robbery, not to protect himself, but to ensure his employees felt safe. Maya was cleaning tables after the lunch service when Henry approached with an expression of barely controlled fury. "Maya, I need to speak with you privately." Something in his tone made her stomach clench with familiar dread. She followed him into his office, where he closed the door and turned to face her with devastating news. "Immigration Services received an anonymous tip this morning claiming you're working under false documentation." The blood drained from Maya's face. "What?" "They're conducting a full investigation into your employment status. Legal documentation, background verification, the works. If there's anything irregular about your papers." Maya sank into a chair, her mind racing. Her documentation was legitimate, but it wouldn't survive deep scrutiny because it had been created by people who specialized in helping victims disappear from dangerous situations. Immigration investigators would eventually trace the documents back to their source, exposing not just Maya, but an entire network that helped women escape abusive families and arranged marriages. Who would do this? Henri asked gently. Maya already knew. There was only one person who had both the motivation and resources to destroy her life so thoroughly. Someone who'd been watching her closely enough to know exactly where to strike. "I have to quit," she said quietly. "Maya, no. We can fight this. Alexander has excellent lawyers. I can't involve Alex in this. If immigration connects him to my case, it could damage his businesses, his reputation. I won't let that happen." "Then what will you do?" Maya stood up, her decision made. What I've always done. Run. Henri grabbed her arm gently. You don't have to live like this. Whatever you're running from, there might be another way. You don't understand. The people I'm running from don't give up, they don't forgive, and they have enough money and connections to destroy anyone who tries to help me. That evening, Maya packed her few belongings into a single duffel bag. The same routine she'd performed in 3 different cities over the past 4 years. Leave no trace. Take nothing that couldn't be replaced, disappear before anyone realized she was gone. She was almost finished when she heard a key in the lock. Only one person had a key to her apartment. The landlord, and he'd given Maya explicit instructions never to use it except in emergencies. Maya positioned herself behind the door, ready to fight if necessary, but the person who entered was Alexander Thornfield. Maya? Henry told me what happened. We need to… Alex stopped short when he saw the packed bag on her bed. No. You shouldn't be here. You're leaving. I have to. No, you don't. We can handle this together. I have lawyers, investigators, resources. Alex, stop. Maya's voice was firm but not unkind. This isn't your fight. Like hell it isn't. Someone is targeting you to get to me. That makes it absolutely my fight. Maya turned to face him fully, and Alex saw something in her eyes that made his blood run cold. This wasn't fear or uncertainty. This was the look of someone who'd made a final decision and wouldn't be swayed by arguments or emotions. You think this is about you, but it's not. This is about my past catching up with me, just like I always knew it would. What past? Maya, talk to me. Whatever this is, we can handle it. I can't tell you. Why not? Because you're a good man who believes problems can be solved with money and determination. But some problems don't have solutions. Some people can't be fought or reasoned with or bought off. Sometimes the only option is to run. Alex moved closer, his voice desperate. I'm not letting you disappear from my life because someone sent an anonymous tip to immigration. It won't stop with immigration. Maya's voice was flat, emotionless. Next, it'll be the IRS. Then it'll be criminal investigations based on planted evidence. Then it'll be threats against people I care about. It escalates until everyone around me is in danger. Who is it? Who are you so afraid of? Maya was quiet for a long moment, weighing how much truth she could safely share. My family. Your family is threatening you. My family sold me. The words hung in the air like a physical blow. Alex felt his knees buckle slightly as the implications hit him. When I was 17, my parents arranged a marriage to a man I'd never met. Zhang Wei, heir to a shipping fortune, 43 years old, with a reputation for acquiring beautiful things and discarding them when he got bored. The bride price was $2 million. Alex's hands clenched into fists. Jesus Christ. I refused. My grandfather supported my decision and offered to let me stay with him, but my parents threatened to destroy his school, ruin his reputation, and have him deported if he interfered. So I agreed to meet Zhang Wei, thinking maybe I could convince him I wasn't suitable. Maya's voice became distant, as if she were recounting someone else's story. He didn't want a wife. He wanted a possession. Something beautiful and exotic to display at social functions and abuse in private. When I continued refusing, he had me kidnapped and held until the wedding. How did you escape? My grandfather's training. Zhang Wei's men underestimated what a 17-year-old girl could do when properly motivated. I fought my way out, took money from Zhang Wei's safe, and disappeared. That was 5 years ago. 4 years, 7 months, 12 days. Zhang Wei has been looking for me ever since. Not because he loves me, but because I embarrassed him. I made him look weak in front of his associates. In his world, that's unforgivable. Alex felt rage building in his chest like a physical fire. Why haven't you gone to the police? With what evidence? Zhang Wei's operation is completely legal on paper. Arranged marriages aren't illegal if both parties appear to consent. And my family would swear I was mentally unstable, that I ran away from a loving home and a generous suitor. But you're an American citizen. You have rights. I'm a Chinese-American woman with no money, no connections, and no proof of crimes that were carefully constructed to appear legal. Zhang Wei has teams of lawyers, politicians in his pocket, and enough money to make problems disappear permanently. Alex understood now why Maya had been so resistant to his interest. She wasn't playing hard to get or protecting herself from heartbreak. She was protecting herself from a genuine threat that could cost her everything, including her life. So you've been running for 4 years. New city every 18 months. New identity, new job, new life. It worked until someone figured out who I really am. Someone like Marcus Webb. Maya's head snapped up in surprise. What? My business partner. He's been acting strange lately, asking questions about you, taking calls he won't explain. I thought he was just being protective of the business, but now… Alex, you have to stay away from me. If Marcus is involved, then Zhang Wei knows exactly where I am. Coming here puts you in danger. I don't care about danger. Well, I do. Maya's composure finally cracked. I care about you getting hurt because of me. I care about your business being destroyed because you tried to help someone you barely know. I care about good people suffering because I was selfish enough to let myself care about someone again. Alex reached for her, but Maya stepped back, shaking her head. I'm leaving tonight. Don't try to find me. Don't hire investigators or use your connections. Just let me go and forget we ever met. Maya, promise me. Alex looked at her for a long moment, seeing the fear and desperation she was trying so hard to hide. I can't promise that. Then you're going to get us both killed. Maya grabbed her bag and headed for the door, but Alex blocked her path. There has to be another way. There isn't. What if we expose him? What if we go public with what he's done? With what proof? My word against his? He'll destroy me in court and come after you next. What if we make sure he can't? Something in Alex's tone made Maya look at him more carefully. What do you mean? Give me 24 hours. Don't run. Don't disappear. Give me 1 day to show you there's another option. Alex, this isn't a business problem you can solve with strategy and resources. Maybe not. But I'm not giving up on you without a fight. Maya stared at him, torn between hope and terror. Everything in her experience told her to run immediately, but something in Alex's eyes made her want to believe that maybe, just maybe, there was another way. 24 hours, she said finally. But if you can't find a solution that doesn't put you at risk, I'm gone. Deal. As Alex left her apartment, neither of them noticed the van parked across the street or the long-range camera capturing their every move. Marcus Webb was already implementing the next phase of his plan, and 24 hours might not be nearly enough time to save them both. Alexander Thornfield had built his business empire by being prepared for any contingency, but nothing had prepared him for the phone call that woke him at 4 a.m. Mr. Thornfield? This is Detective Martinez, NYPD. We need you to come to Bellevue Hospital immediately. Maya Chen was found unconscious in an alley in Chinatown 3 hours ago. Alex was dressed and in his car before the detective finished explaining the circumstances. Maya had been discovered by a jogger, beaten unconscious with no identification and no obvious motive for the attack. Only the emergency contact card in her wallet, which listed the restaurant, had led police to Alex. The drive to the hospital passed in a blur of rage and self-recrimination. He should have insisted she stay with him. He should have provided better security. He should have recognized that 24 hours was too long when dealing with people willing to kidnap and abuse teenage girls. Detective Martinez met him in the emergency waiting room, a tired-looking woman in her 40s who'd clearly seen too much violence in her career. She's stable but unconscious. Concussion, 3 broken ribs, extensive bruising. Whoever did this knew exactly how to hurt her without leaving obvious evidence of torture. Has she said anything? She hasn't regained consciousness since we found her. But Mr. Thornfield, there's something else. We found this in her jacket pocket. Martinez handed him a photograph that made his blood freeze. It showed Maya and Alex leaving the diner 4 nights earlier. But Maya's face had been circled in red ink, with a message written on the back in Chinese characters. Can you read this? Martinez asked. Alex stared at the foreign writing, feeling helpless. No, but I know someone who can. An hour later, Henri Dubois arrived at the hospital with Dr. Kim Nakamura, a linguistics professor from Columbia who specialized in Chinese dialects. Dr. Nakamura studied the photograph with growing concern. This is written in traditional Chinese, but the phrasing is archaic. Formal. It says, "The runaway bride will return to her rightful husband, or all who shelter her will suffer the same fate." Rightful husband? Detective Martinez looked confused. Alex explained Maya's situation as concisely as possible, watching Martinez's expression shift from skepticism to grim understanding. So this Jiang Wei character had her beaten as a warning? Not Jiang Wei directly, he's too smart to get his hands dirty. But his people, yes. We'll need evidence to build a case. I might be able to help with that. Everyone turned as Marcus Webb entered the waiting room, his expression perfectly crafted to convey concern and support. Alex felt his suspicion crystallize into certainty. "Marcus, how did you know to come here?" "I heard about the attack through police contacts. I came as soon as I could." "Police contacts? Alex, we need to talk. Privately." Against his better judgment, Alex followed Marcus to a quiet corner of the waiting room. Marcus glanced around to ensure they weren't overheard before speaking in low, urgent tones. "This has to stop. Now." "What has to stop?" "Your involvement with this woman. She's dangerous, Alex. She's brought violent criminals into our lives, threatened our business, and now she's putting everyone around her at risk. Maya is the victim here. Maya is a magnet for trouble. And as long as you're associated with her, that trouble becomes our trouble." Alex studied his partner's face, seeing something he'd never noticed before, a coldness that went deeper than business concerns. "You did this. What? You're the one who called immigration. You're the one who told Jiang Wei where to find her." Marcus's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. "Alex, you're emotional right now. You're not thinking clearly. Answer the question, Marcus. Did you contact Jiang Wei?" "I contacted people who could verify whether this woman was who she claimed to be. Yes." The admission hit Alex like a physical blow. "You son of a bitch. I protected our business interests. This woman was using false documentation, lying about her background, and manipulating you into a relationship that could have destroyed everything we've built. By selling her out to the man who tried to force her into marriage. By ensuring that dangerous criminals didn't become our problem." Alex felt rage building in his chest, but he forced himself to stay calm. Losing his temper now wouldn't help Maya, and it might prevent him from learning the full extent of Marcus's betrayal. "What exactly did you tell Jiang Wei?" "I told him where she was working and living. Nothing more." "And what did he offer you in return?" Marcus hesitated, and Alex knew he'd found the real motive. "Jiang Wei owns 40% of the investment consortium trying to buy our restaurant chain. He made it clear that his participation was contingent on certain obstacles being removed." "Obstacles? You mean Maya?" "I mean distractions that were preventing you from focusing on business." Alex felt the last of his illusions about his partnership and friendship with Marcus crumble into dust. "How long have you been planning this?" "Since I realized you were serious about pursuing her." "Alex, this deal represents $40 million in profit. $40 million you were willing to throw away for a woman you'd known for less than a week. So you decided to have her beaten and threatened. I decided to remind her that some situations can't be fixed with good intentions and deep pockets. I thought she'd take the hint and disappear on her own. But she didn't. No. She came to you for help, which forced more direct measures." Alex looked at the man he'd considered his closest friend for over a decade and realized he'd never really known him at all. Marcus had always been ambitious and calculating, but Alex had assumed those traits were balanced by loyalty and basic human decency. He'd been wrong. "The partnership is over. Alex, don't make emotional decisions you'll regret. The only thing I regret is trusting you." Alex's voice was deadly quiet. "You have 24 hours to remove your belongings from our offices. After that, security will escort you from the premises. You're making a mistake. Without my connections, your expansion plans will proceed without you, or they won't. Either way, you'll have no part in them." Alex turned to leave, but Marcus grabbed his arm. "This won't end here. Jiang Wei won't stop because you fired me. If anything, you've made the situation worse. Then I'll deal with Jiang Wei directly." "With what?" "Good intentions? Jiang Wei has been acquiring women like collectible art for 20 years. He has politicians, judges, and police commissioners in 3 countries on his payroll. You think your money and your American lawyers scare him? Alex pulled free of Marcus's grip. We'll find out. As Alex walked away, Marcus called after him one last time. She'll get you killed, Alex, and for what? A woman who spent 4 years lying about everything, including her name? Alex stopped. What do you mean, including her name? Marcus smiled with cold satisfaction. Maya Chen isn't her real name. She's been using false identities for so long, I doubt she remembers who she really is. The woman you think you're protecting doesn't even exist. Despite everything he'd learned about Marcus's betrayal, this final revelation hit Alex like a knife to the chest. He'd fallen in love with someone whose name he didn't even know. But as he returned to Maya's hospital room and saw her lying unconscious, her face swollen from the beating Jiang Wei's men had given her, Alex realized it didn't matter. Whatever her real name was, whatever lies she'd told to protect herself, the woman in that hospital bed was someone worth fighting for. Doctor. Nakamura was still examining the photograph when Alex returned, her expression troubled. There's something else, she said quietly. The calligraphy style is very specific. Whoever wrote this was educated in traditional Chinese schools, probably in Hong Kong or Taiwan. But there are subtle characteristics that suggest American influence. What does that mean? It means this message wasn't written by Jiang Wei or his associates in China. It was written by someone Chinese-American, someone who learned traditional writing but has been living in America for many years. Alex felt pieces of a larger puzzle beginning to fall into place. Someone like Maya's family, possibly, or someone working for them here in the States. Detective Martinez looked up from her notes. Mr. Thornfield, we're going to need a complete list of everyone who knew about Ms. Chen's location and situation. If this Jiang Wei has people operating in New York, we need to identify them. Alex nodded, but his attention was focused on Maya, who was beginning to stir in her hospital bed. Her eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first, then gradually sharpening as she recognized where she was. Alex? Her voice was barely a whisper. I'm here. They found me. I know, but you're safe now. Maya tried to sit up, wincing at the pain from her broken ribs. No one is safe. They'll keep coming until they get what they want. What if we give them something else they want more? There's nothing Jiang Wei wants more than recovering his lost face. What about $40 million? Maya looked at him in confusion, and Alex explained Marcus's betrayal and the business deal that had motivated it. As he spoke, Maya's expression shifted from confusion to understanding to something approaching hope. You're talking about destroying their expansion plans. I'm talking about making it more expensive for Jiang Wei to pursue you than to let you go. Alex, these people don't think like Western businessmen. Face and reputation matter more than money. Then we attack his face and reputation. Dr. Nakamura cleared her throat. Actually, there might be a way to do both. Everyone turned to look at her, and she continued with growing excitement. Traditional Chinese marriage contracts from Jiang Wei's generation often include very specific clauses about family honor and business reputation. If Maya was contractually promised as a bride and then refused to fulfill that obligation, Jiang Wei might be legally entitled to recover not just her, but compensation for the loss of face. How does that help us? Alex asked. Because those same contracts usually include clauses about the bride's family's obligations. If Maya's parents accepted money for a marriage that was never consummated, they might be legally obligated to return that money with interest. Maya sat up straighter despite the pain. $2 million, plus 4 years of interest and penalties, which in traditional Chinese business law could easily amount to $8 or $10 million, Dr. Nakamura confirmed. Alex felt hope building in his chest. So if we can prove Maya's parents breached their contract, Jiang Wei might be more interested in recovering his money from them than pursuing Maya. Maya looked between Alex and Dr. Nakamura, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. But we'd need proof of the original agreement, documentation of the money transfer, evidence that my parents acted in bad faith, all of which might be available through legal discovery if we file the right kind of lawsuit, Detective Martinez added. For the first time in 4 years, Maya Chen began to believe that maybe, just maybe, she wouldn't have to run anymore. But first, They would have to survive Jiang Wei's next move, which was already in motion. The confrontation came sooner than any of them expected. Jiang Wei arrived in New York 18 hours after Maya regained consciousness, bringing with him a team of lawyers, security personnel, and enough political influence to make Detective Martinez's investigation suddenly disappear from official channels. But Alexander Thornfield had spent the previous day making preparations of his own. "You requested this meeting," Jiang Wei said as he entered the private dining room of Le Bernardin. He was exactly what Alex had expected, impeccably dressed, coldly handsome, with the kind of casual arrogance that came from a lifetime of getting whatever he wanted. "I trust you have something meaningful to discuss." Alex stood to greet his guest, noting the two bodyguards who positioned themselves near the exits. "I have a business proposition. I don't conduct business with people who harbor stolen property." "Stolen property?" Alex kept his voice level despite the rage building in his chest. "You mean Maya?" "I mean my contractually obligated bride, who has been unlawfully kept from fulfilling her family's agreement." "The woman who was kidnapped and held against her will, you mean?" Jiang Wei's expression didn't change. "Different perspectives on the same situation, but I'm not here to debate ancient history. I'm here to recover what belongs to me. Maya doesn't belong to anyone. Maya Lee belongs to my household according to a legally binding contract signed by her parents and witnessed by appropriate authorities. The fact that she ran away doesn't invalidate that agreement." Alex noted the different name but filed that information away for later. "Contracts can be broken. Not this one. Too much money was exchanged. Too many reputations are at stake. Maya will return with me to San Francisco, where the delayed wedding ceremony will finally take place. And if she refuses, she won't refuse. Not after her family explains the consequences of continued disobedience." Jiang Wei gestured, and one of his associates placed a tablet on the table. The screen showed video footage of an elderly man Alex recognized as Li Wei Chen, Maya's grandfather, being led away from his dojo in handcuffs. "Immigration violations," Jiang Wei explained calmly, "discovered during a routine audit of his school's financial records. He's currently being held for deportation hearings." Alex felt his hands clench into fists. "You son of a bitch. I'm a businessman protecting my investments. Maya's grandfather will be released and all charges dropped as soon as she fulfills her obligations, if she continues to resist." Jiang Wei didn't need to finish the threat. The message was clear: comply or watch the man who'd raised her suffer the consequences. "There's another option," Alex said quietly. "I'm listening. You received $2 million from Maya's parents as part of the marriage contract. According to traditional Chinese business law, if the bride's family breaches that contract through deception or bad faith, they are obligated to return your investment with appropriate penalties." Jiang Wei's expression sharpened with interest. "Go on. Maya's parents lied to you. They claimed she was willing to marry you, but they knew she would refuse. They took your money under false pretenses, which constitutes fraud under both American and Chinese law. Even if that were true, recovering money from her parents doesn't address the matter of face. I was publicly humiliated when Maya disappeared. That requires personal compensation." Alex had anticipated this argument. What if the compensation was substantial enough to demonstrate that you were the wronged party? What if everyone involved understood that you were generous enough to release Maya from an obligation her parents had fraudulently created? How substantial? $8 million immediately, plus public acknowledgement that you were deceived by Maya's family and that your decision to release her demonstrates wisdom and compassion rather than weakness. Jiang Wei leaned back in his chair, considering the offer. $8 million was significantly more than he'd originally invested, and it would allow him to save face while eliminating a problem that had become increasingly expensive to maintain. Who would provide this compensation? I would. And in return, Maya goes free. Completely free. No further contact, no claims on her, no threats against her family. You drop the charges against her grandfather and leave all of them alone permanently. You're willing to pay $8 million for a woman you've known for less than 2 weeks? I'm willing to pay $8 million to ensure that a good person doesn't spend the rest of her life running from a situation she never chose. Jiang Wei studied Alex for a long moment, his calculating mind weighing the costs and benefits of the proposed arrangement. There would have to be documentation, legal agreements that protect both parties. Of course. And Maya would have to sign paperwork acknowledging that she was never coerced, that her refusal to marry was her own choice, not the result of outside influence. Alex hesitated. He could see the trap in Jiang Wei's demand, documentation that would shift all blame to Maya and her family while absolving Jiang Wei of any wrongdoing. She'll sign whatever's necessary, Alex said finally. Then we have an agreement. The legal paperwork took another 4 hours to complete, with teams of lawyers from both sides crafting documents that would satisfy American courts, Chinese business traditions, and Jiang Wei's need to emerge from the situation with his reputation intact. Maya signed the papers in Alex's office, her hand shaking slightly as she acknowledged that her 4-year nightmare was finally ending. Li Wei-chen was released from immigration custody before the ink was dry on the contracts. But it was the conversation that followed Jiang Wei's departure that Alex would remember most clearly. $8 million, Maya said quietly. That's more money than I'll earn in my entire lifetime. It's less than I spend on art in a good year. That's not the point, Alex. You barely know me. You know I lied about my name, my background, probably dozens of other things. Why would you risk so much for someone you can't trust? Alex sat on the edge of her hospital bed, choosing his words carefully. What's your real name? Li Mei Hua. Maya is the American name I chose when I started running. Li Mei Hua. Alex repeated slowly. It's beautiful. It means beautiful plum blossom. My grandfather said I was born during plum blossom season, when winter is ending and spring is about to begin. Is that what this is? The end of winter? Maya looked at him with eyes that held 4 years' worth of pain and hope. I don't know. I've been running for so long I'm not sure I remember how to stay in one place. We could figure it out together. Alex, I don't have anything to offer you. No money, no connections, no social status. I'm a waitress with a fake identity and enough emotional baggage to fill a cargo ship. You have something worth more than all of that. What? You make me want to be worthy of you. Maya was quiet for a long moment, studying his face. You realize this is crazy, right? We've known each other for less than 2 weeks. People don't fall in love that quickly in real life. Don't they? Do they? Alex leaned closer, his voice soft but certain. I don't know about other people, I only know about us. And what do you know about us? I know that I'd rather spend one day being completely honest with you than a lifetime being fake with anyone else. I know that watching you fight those gunmen was the moment I realized I'd been sleepwalking through my life. I know that the thought of you disappearing terrifies me more than any business deal I've ever made. Maya felt tears gathering in her eyes. Alex, I know you're scared. I know you've been hurt by people who were supposed to protect you. I know you have every reason not to trust someone like me. Someone like you? Someone rich, privileged, someone who's never had to fight for survival or run from anything more dangerous than a hostile takeover. Maya touched his face gently, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. You're wrong about that. About what? You think you don't understand survival, but you do. You survived having Marcus as a best friend for 12 years without letting him destroy your basic decency. You survived growing up rich without becoming entitled or cruel. You survived having everything handed to you without forgetting how to work for something that mattered. Like what? Like this, like us. Alex captured her hand and held it against his cheek. Is there an us? I don't know, but I'd like to find out. Even though I'm completely crazy for falling in love with someone I met 2 weeks ago, especially because you're completely crazy for falling in love with someone you met 2 weeks ago. Alex leaned down and kissed her softly, and Maya felt something inside her chest that had been frozen for 4 years finally begin to thaw. When they broke apart, she was smiling despite the tears streaming down her face. So what happens now? She asked. Now you recover from your injuries. Then you quit your job as a waitress. I need to work, Alex. I can't let you support me. I'm not talking about supporting you. I'm talking about offering you a position that matches your actual qualifications. Maya looked confused. What qualifications? Alex smiled. Henri told me you speak 4 languages fluently, have sommelier-level wine knowledge, and understand fine dining service better than people who've been in the industry for decades. I'm expanding into international markets next year. I need someone who can handle cultural complexities and high-stakes negotiations. You're offering me a job? I'm offering you a career if you want it. Maya stared at him in amazement. You're serious. Completely serious. Though I should warn you, the position comes with some unusual requirements, such as the person in this role would need to attend a lot of business dinners, travel frequently, and occasionally accompany the CEO to social functions. That sounds suspiciously like dating. Dating with excellent health insurance and a 6-figure salary. Maya laughed despite herself. You're ridiculous. I'm practical. I need someone I can trust in that position, and I'd like to spend more time with the woman I'm in love with. This solves both problems. What if it doesn't work out between us? Then you'll still have a career you're qualified for, and a reference that will open doors anywhere in the hospitality industry. Maya considered the offer, hardly able to believe her life was changing so dramatically. I have one condition. Name it. I want to visit my grandfather before I make any major decisions. I need to talk to him about what happened, make sure he's really safe. Of course, we'll fly to San Francisco tomorrow. I'm not letting you out of my sight until I'm absolutely certain Zhang Wei honors his agreement. Maya smiled. That could take a while. I'm hoping it takes forever. Li Wei Chen was waiting for them at the small airport outside San Francisco, looking older than Maya remembered, but unmistakably her grandfather. When he saw her walking toward him with Alex, his weathered face broke into the first genuine smile Maya had seen from him in years. Mei Hua, he said softly, using her real name as he embraced her. You look like yourself again. What do you mean? For 4 years you've been carrying the weight of other people's choices. Now you move like someone who's remembered she has choices of her own. Maya introduced Alex, who bowed respectfully and addressed Li Wei in carefully practiced Mandarin. The old master smiled at the effort and responded in English. Your pronunciation needs work, but your intentions are clear. You care for my granddaughter. Very much, sir. Good. She deserves someone who sees her value. Li Wei looked between them with knowing eyes. The winter is ending, Mei Hua. Are you ready for spring? Maya looked at Alex, who was trying to follow the conversation despite the language barrier, and felt the last of her defenses finally crumble. Yes, grandfather, I think I am. 6 months later, Maya Chen, officially Li Mei Hua Thornfield after their quiet courthouse wedding, stood in the kitchen of their newest restaurant in Hong Kong, coordinating with chefs who spoke 3 different dialects of Chinese and marveling at how dramatically her life had changed. Alex found her there as the evening service wound down, reviewing inventory reports that most people would have delegated to assistants. Any regrets? He asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. About what? Marrying a man who thinks he can solve every problem with money and determination. Maya leaned back against his chest, smiling. That depends. Any regrets about marrying a woman who can take down armed robbers but still checks the locks twice before going to sleep? Not even one. Good. Because I'm told this job comes with some unusual requirements. Such as? The person in this role needs to attend a lot of business dinners, travel frequently, and occasionally kiss the CEO when he's being particularly charming. Alex turned her around in his arms, grinning. That does sound challenging. I'm up for it if you are. Mrs. Thornfield, I thought you'd never ask. As Alex kissed his wife in the kitchen of their Hong Kong restaurant, both of them remembered that sometimes the best love stories begin with the most unlikely meetings, survive the most impossible obstacles, and end up exactly where they belong.
Tears streamed down Clara Miller's face as the word fired echoed in the noisy diner's at syllable, a hammer blow to her already fragile world. Her manager's voice was cold, clinical, citing breach of company policy and unauthorized transactions. The transgression. Paying for a hungry, destitute man's $15 meal with her own tip money. As she was escorted out, her uniform stripped from her, she felt the burning stares of co-workers and customers. She had lost everything for a simple act of kindness. But what she didn't know, what no one could have known, was that the homeless man she helped was no homeless man at all. And his return the next day wouldn't just change her life. It would shatter the very foundations of the multi-million-dollar corporation that had just cast her aside. The alarm on Clara Miller's phone didn't so much chime as it shrieked a piercing 500 AM digital scream that sliced through the thin walls of her small apartment. For a moment she lay still, the familiar ache in her lower back, a dull reminder of yesterday's 12-hour shift. The scent of stale coffee and the faint, sweet smell of her son's lavender-scented laundry detergent hung in the air. This was her world, a symphony of exhaustion and love played on a loop. She slid out of bed, her bare feet meeting the cold linoleum. In the other room, her 7-year-old son Leo coughed a dry, rattling sound that made her heart seize every time. His asthma was a constant, unwelcome guest in their lives, its presence dictated by the changing seasons, the city pollution, and the cruel lottery of genetics. The new nebulizer sat on his bedside table, a plastic monument to their last emergency room visit and the mountain of debt it had created. Clara was 29, but on mornings like this she felt 100. Her reflection in the bathroom mirror showed a woman she barely recognized. The bright, hopeful eyes of her youth were now framed by faint lines of worry. Her blonde hair, once her pride, was perpetually pulled back in a severe, functional ponytail. She was a waitress at the Golden Spoon Diner, a mid-tier establishment owned by the sprawling corporate giant Kensington Eateries, Inc. It wasn't a glamorous job, but it was a job. It paid the rent just barely, and kept Leo's inhalers filled most of the time. The uniform was a drab polyester affair, a pale yellow dress that always seemed to smell of fryer oil, no matter how many times she washed it. As she buttoned it up, she ran through the day's mental checklist. Drop Leo at Mrs. Gable's. Pray there's no traffic. Remember the Wednesday soup special is clam chowder, and most importantly, stay on the right side of Brenda Vance. Brenda was the diner's manager, a woman who seemed to be forged from steel corporate policy and burnt coffee. She managed with a clipboard in one hand and a stopwatch in the other. To Brenda, customers weren't people. They were tickets. Employees weren't a team. They were units of labor. Everything was a metric table: turn time, average, guest check, side dish, upsell percentage. Compassion was an inefficient variable she had long since eliminated from her management equation. "Miller, you're 3 minutes late," Brenda would say if Clara clocked in at 6:03 a.m. That's 180 seconds of unproductive labor cost the company has to absorb. Clara swallowed a dry piece of toast, kissed a sleeping Leo on the forehead, and whispered, "Be good for Mrs. Gable, sweetie. Mummy loves you." She scribbled a note, left it on the counter with a small glass of juice, and slipped out into the pre-dawn chill of the Chicago streets. The Golden Spoon Diner was already humming with a low-level anxiety when she arrived. The cooks were slapping bacon on the griddle, the dishwashers were clattering racks of plates, and the other morning shift waitresses were rushing around, their faces tight with a practiced, joyless urgency. "Morning, Clara," sighed Maria, another waitress, as she filled a tray with coffee mugs. "Brenda's on a warpath today. Mark Renshaw is coming." Clara's stomach tightened. Mark Renshaw was the regional manager, a corporate shark known for his surprise inspections and his penchant for firing staff to streamline operations. His visits meant Brenda would be 10 times more demanding, scrutinizing every pour of coffee, every crumb on the floor. "Great," Clara muttered, tying her apron. "Just what we need." The morning rush was a blur of frantic activity. Orders were shouted, plates were delivered, and coffee was sloshed. Clara moved with an efficiency born of years of practice, a forced smile plastered on her face. She was polite to the grumpy old man in booth 4, who always complained his coffee was too hot. She was patient with the table of indecisive tourists. She even managed a genuine laugh for Mr. Henderson, a regular who told the same joke every single day. Through it all, she was acutely aware of Brenda's hawk-like eyes, following her every move. She saw Brenda tap her watch as Clara spent an extra minute helping Mr. Henderson find his dropped glasses. She saw the slight frown when a child at one of her tables spilled a glass of water, forcing Clara to stop and clean it up. By midday, the initial rush had subsided into a steady, manageable flow. Clara finally had a moment to breathe, leaning against the service counter and rubbing her aching feet. Her tips so far were meager. She did a quick mental calculation. After paying Mrs. Gable and buying groceries, there would be barely enough to cover the copay for Leo's new prescription. The anxiety never far from the surface began to bubble up again. She had to make more. She had to get more tables, turn them faster, upsell more desserts. She had to be the perfect employee. It was then at precisely 1:15 p.m. that the bell above the diner door jingled and a man shuffled in. He was the kind of person most people try not to see. His clothes were ragged, his graying hair was matted, and his face was etched with the kind of deep, weary lines that speak of a life lived on the harsh edges of society. He hesitated at the door, as if unsure of his welcome, his eyes scanning the room with a mixture of hunger and shame. Brenda, standing near the cash register, saw him immediately. Her lips thinned into a razor-straight line. She was already moving towards him, her body language radiating hostility, ready to eject him before he could even take a step further. But Clara, whose station included the empty tables by the door, saw him first. Their eyes met for a fleeting second, and in his, she didn't see a nuisance or a problem. She saw a profound and desperate exhaustion. Acting on an instinct she couldn't explain, she picked up a menu, stepped in front of a glaring Brenda, and gave the man a small, gentle smile. "Table for one?" she asked, her voice soft. The man looked surprised, then nodded slowly. Brenda stopped dead in her tracks, her face a mask of incandescent fury. The battle lines had just been drawn at table 7, and Clara had no idea she was fighting for a man who held the entire world in his hands. The man slid into the cracked vinyl of the booth at table 7, moving with a stiff awkwardness as if his body ached. He hunched over the menu Clara handed him, though he didn't seem to be reading it. His gaze was distant, his hands trembling slightly as he folded and unfolded the corner of the laminated page. From across the room, Clara could feel Brenda's stare burning into her back. It was a direct act of defiance to have seated him, and they both knew it. Clara approached the table, her notepad in hand. "Can I get you something to drink to start coffees fresh?" The man looked up. His eyes, she noticed, were a surprisingly clear, intelligent blue, though they were clouded with weariness. Just water, please. Thank you." His voice was raspy, unused. When she returned with the water, he still hadn't opened the menu. He was just staring out the window, watching the city rush by a solitary island in the bustling diner. "Have you decided what you'd like?" Clara asked, gently, trying to keep her tone professional. He flinched slightly, as if startled from a deep thought. "Oh, He looked down at the menu, then back at her, a deep flush of shame coloring his weathered cheeks. What's the cheapest thing you've got that's filling? He mumbled, his eyes fixed on the table. Clara's heart broke a little. She'd heard that question before in different forms. The single mother trying to feed 2 kids on $10. The student with his laptop trying to make 1 coffee last for 4 hours of free Wi-Fi. "The sunrise special is our best value," she said, pointing to the all-day breakfast section. 2 eggs, bacon toast, and hash browns. It's $10. Or, she leaned in a little, lowering her voice, the kitchen staff made a big batch of beef stew for their own lunch. It's not on the menu, but it's hearty. I can get you a big bowl of that for $5. Comes with bread. His head shot up, his blue eyes wide with a mixture of surprise and gratitude. "The stew," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "Yes, please. Thank you." As Clara walked to the kitchen to place the order, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. This was why she'd gotten into service in the first place, years ago, before life had worn her down. It was about the simple human act of feeding someone, of offering a moment of comfort and care. The man who had mumbled his name was Art, ate the stew, with a slow, deliberate hunger that suggested he was savoring every single bite. He didn't wolf it down like a starving man. He ate with a quiet dignity that seemed at odds with his disheveled appearance. He cleaned the bowl with the piece of bread, his movements methodical. Clara kept his water glass full, checking on him, as she would any other customer, despite Brenda's increasingly obvious glares and pointed gestures towards the other, more profitable tables in her section. Art was a silent customer. He didn't complain, didn't ask for anything, but he watched. Clara didn't know it, but he was watching everything. He watched her patiently explain the menu to an elderly couple who couldn't read the small print. He saw her slip a handful of crayons and a coloring page to a restless toddler, earning a grateful smile from the frazzled mother. He saw her expertly juggle 6 plates on her arm, her movements efficient and graceful, despite her obvious fatigue. He saw her co-worker Maria drop a tray of glasses, and he watched as Clara was the first one there. Not with a complaint, but with a quiet, "Don't worry, I've got it," as she helped pick up the shards of broken glass. Most of all, he noticed the interactions with Brenda. He saw the manager reprimand Clara in hushed, angry tones for spending too long at his table. "Your job is to maximize turnover, Miller, not run a charity. That booth has been occupied for 45 minutes for a $5 sale. Unacceptable." Clara simply nodded, her face impassive, and said, "Yes, Brenda." When Art had finished, he sat for a long time, just nursing his glass of water. Finally, he signaled for the check. Clara brought it over with a small, encouraging smile. "No rush at all," she said. He nodded and reached into the pockets of his worn-out jacket. He patted his front pockets, then his back pockets. A look of confusion crossed his face, which quickly morphed into panic. He started searching more frantically, his breathing becoming shallow. "Is everything all right?" Clara asked, her smile fading into concern. "My wallet." He stammered, his eyes wide with genuine fear. "It's gone. It must have been stolen on the bus. I don't have any money. I can't pay." He looked utterly mortified, his face pale under his weathered skin. He started to rise as if to flee. "I'm so sorry, This was the moment of truth. Company policy was crystal clear, drilled into them by Brenda, and reinforced in training manuals from Kensington Eatery's headquarters. If a customer cannot pay you, do not engage. You do not make a scene. You signal the manager immediately. Brenda would then call security or the police, depending on the situation. It was a zero-tolerance policy designed to prevent theft and protect the company's assets. Clara looked at the terrified man in front of her. Then she glanced across the diner at Brenda, who was already watching them. Her eyes narrowed with suspicion. She knew what she was supposed to do. She was supposed to raise her hand, call Brenda over, and let the cold, impersonal gears of corporate policy grind this poor man into dust over a $5 bowl of stew. She thought of Leo. She thought of the overdue medical bill. She thought of her precarious financial situation and how desperately she needed this job. Losing it would be catastrophic. Then she looked back at Art, at the sheer soul-crushing humiliation in his eyes. And in that moment, her own struggles didn't make her harder. They made her softer. She understood desperation. She understood what it felt like to be one unlucky breakaway from disaster. Making a split-second decision that would alter the course of her life, she gave him a reassuring look and placed a hand gently on his arm. "Don't worry about it," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Stay here. Please, don't move." Before the man could protest, she walked away from the table, not towards Brenda, but towards the small hidden pocket in her apron where she kept her day's tips. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. Every instinct screamed at her to follow the rules to protect herself and her son. But the image of the man's panicked face was seared into her mind. She fumbled in her apron pocket, her fingers closing around the small, crumpled wad of bills she had earned so far. A 10 3-1s and a handful of change. $13 and some cents. It was her gas money, her grocery money, her just-in-case Leo's inhaler runs out money. It was everything. With trembling hands, she smoothed out a $5 bill and 2 ones. The check was for $5, plus tax, totaling $5,045. She would use her own money, ring it up as a cash payment, and Brenda would be none the wiser. The man could leave without the humiliation of a police escort, and she could keep the job she so desperately needed. It felt like a simple, elegant, and compassionate solution. She walked to the point-of-sale terminal at the waitstaff station, her back to Brenda. She quickly typed in the table number and selected the cash payment option. Her hands were sweating as she opened the cash drawer to deposit the money. "What are you doing, Miller?" The voice was ice-cold right behind her. Clara froze her hand, still inside the cash drawer. She slowly turned to face Brenda Vance. The manager's face was a thunderous mask. Her eyes narrowed to slits. I was just cashing out table 7, Clara stammered, trying to sound casual. "With what money?" Brenda's voice was dangerously low. "I've been watching you. That man told you he couldn't pay. I saw it on his face. And you did not signal for a manager, as per protocol." Clara's mind raced. He found the money. It was in a different pocket. It was a weak lie, and it crumbled instantly under Brenda's intense glare. "Open your hand," Brenda commanded. Clara hesitated. "Brenda, it's really—" "Now, Miller, or I'll have security do it for you." Defeated, Clara opened her hand, revealing her own crumpled bills. Brenda's eyes flickered from the money in Clara's palm to the cash drawer and back again. A slow, cruel smile of triumph spread across her face. This was the moment she had been waiting for. A clear, undeniable breach of Wallacey. "So this is how it is," Brenda said, her voice now rising in volume, attracting the attention of nearby staff and customers. "You are using your own funds to pay for a customer's meal. An unauthorized transaction. A flagrant violation of Kensington Eateries Policy 7B, subsection 4. Employee funds shall not be commingled with company revenue or used to settle a customer's bill under any circumstances." She recited the rule like a religious zealot quoting scripture. The diner was growing quiet. The clatter of cutlery and the low hum of conversation began to fade as people turned to watch the unfolding drama. At table 7, Art looked on his face a mixture of horror and disbelief. He started to get up to say something, but a subtle shake of Clara's head begged him to stay put. Intervening now would only make it worse. He was hungry, Brenda. Clara pleaded, her voice a desperate whisper. He didn't have any money. It was $5. What was I supposed to do? Call the cops on him for a bowl of stew? You were supposed to follow procedure. Brenda snapped her voice, now a full-blown declaration for the entire room to hear. Procedures exist for a reason. To protect this business. What happens next time? Do you give away a steak dinner? Do you start emptying the register for every sob story that walks in that door? You are not just an employee, Miller. You are a liability. The humiliation was a physical force pressing down on Clara, making it hard to breathe. Her cheeks burned. She could feel the pitying stares from her co-workers and the curious, judgmental gazes from the customers. I paid for it, Clara said, her voice trembling but defiant. The company didn't lose a single cent. In fact, you made a profit on the stew. This was the wrong thing to say. Brenda's face contorted with rage. This isn't about one bowl of stew. It's about authority. It's about discipline. It's about the precedent you are setting. You have undermined my authority and willfully disregarded corporate policy. You have proven that you cannot be trusted. Brenda took a step back, her posture rigid and official. She was no longer a diner manager. She was an executioner. Clara Miller. She announced, her voice ringing with a cold finality that chilled Clara to the bone. As of this moment, your employment with Kensington Eateries is terminated. You are fired. The word hung in the air, sharp and brutal. A collective gasp rippled through the diner. Maria had her hands over her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. Even the cooks had stopped working and were staring out from the kitchen pass-through. Brenda, you can't... Clara choked out, tears welling in her eyes. Please, my son, I need this job. You should have thought of your son before you decided to become a martyr for a vagrant, Brenda retorted coldly. Take off your apron. I'll have your final paycheck mailed to you. You have 5 minutes to collect your personal belongings from your locker. I will escort you out myself. Numbly, Clara untied the strings of her apron. The cheap yellow fabric suddenly felt impossibly heavy. She folded it and placed it on the counter. The tears that she had been holding back now streamed freely down her face. She looked past Brenda, her gaze landing on table 7. The man Art was standing now, his face pale, his fists clenched at his sides. He looked like he wanted to speak, to scream, to tear the whole place down. But what could he do? He was a nobody, a homeless man who had inadvertently cost a kind woman her livelihood. Their eyes met one last time, and in his she saw a look of profound, agonizing regret. As Brenda marched her towards the staff lockers, the silence of the diner was broken by the sound of a chair scraping back and a heavy, intentional clatter. Someone had left a $20 bill on table 7, right next to the half-empty glass of water. But it was too late. The gears had been set in motion, and Clara Miller, mother waitress and good Samaritan, was now unemployed. The walk home was a blur. Clara didn't remember the familiar route, the crack in the sidewalk on the corner of Elm and 3rd, or the sound of the elevated train rattling overhead. All she could feel was the phantom weight of the apron on her waist, and the searing heat of humiliation on her cheeks. The city sounds were muffled, as if she were underwater, drowning in a sea of despair. When she reached her apartment building, the 3 flights of stairs felt like a mountain. Each step was a leaden weight, her legs trembling with a combination of exhaustion and shock. The key fumbled in the lock, her hands shaking too much to guide it home. Finally, the door clicked open, and she stepped into the silence of her empty apartment. For a moment, she just stood there in the small entryway, her purse sliding from her shoulder and landing on the floor with a soft thud. The reality of her situation crashed down on her with the force of a physical blow. Fired. The word echoed in the silent apartment, mocking her. Fired for a $5 bowl of stew. Fired for being kind. She sank onto her worn-out sofa, the springs groaning in protest. She didn't cry. The tears had run dry on the walk home, leaving behind a hollow, aching numbness. Her mind, however, was a chaotic storm. How was she going to pay rent next month? The landlord, Mr. Petrov, was a stickler. He didn't do extensions. How would she afford Leo's medication? His new prescription was waiting at the pharmacy, its cost looming like a monster in the dark. What about food? The fridge was already looking bare. Panic began to claw its way up her throat, cold and sharp. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to hold the pieces of her crumbling world together. She was a good worker. She was never late. She covered shifts for others. She did everything that was asked of her, and more. How could it all be undone by one small act of compassion? Her eyes fell on a framed photograph on the end table. It was of her and her late husband, David, taken 5 years ago on a rare trip to the lake. They were smiling, their faces bright with a future that had seemed so full of promise. David had been a chef, a man who believed that food was love. He would have been proud of what she did today. "You always feed a hungry man, Clara," he used to say. "No questions asked. That's the first rule of the kitchen." David had also worked for a Kensington eateries establishment, a more upscale bistro downtown. He'd been passionate, creative, a rising star in the kitchen. Then one night, he'd been fired. The official reason was unauthorized use of company inventory. He had made a beautiful birthday cake for a dishwasher whose family couldn't afford one, using a handful of flour, sugar, and eggs from the pantry. He was fired on the spot by a manager just like Brenda, a man who saw only inventory shrinkage, not a gesture of human decency. The dismissal had broken David's spirit. He struggled to find another job with that mark on his record. The stress, the shame. It led him down a dark path. A year later, he was gone, leaving Clara alone with a 2-year-old Leo and a mountain of grief. The bitter irony was not lost on her. The same corporation, with its same soulless, rigid policies, had now shattered her life just as it had shattered his. It was a cruel repeating pattern, a legacy of corporate indifference that had claimed her family twice. A wave of anger, hot and fierce, finally broke through the numbness. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about David. It was about every little person ground up by the unfeeling machinery of a giant company that valued rules over people. Getting up from the couch, she walked to Leo's room. He was still at Mrs. Gable's. She would have to call and tell her she couldn't afford to pay her for the rest of the week. Her son was sleeping soundly in his small bed, his chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm. The nebulizer stood guard on his nightstand. She reached out and gently brushed a lock of hair from his forehead. He was her whole world. Everything she did for him. And now she had failed him. That was the thought that finally broke her. The tears came again, silent and agonizing. She sank to the floor, her head resting against the side of his bed. and wept. She wept for her lost job, for her shattered pride, for the uncertain future. She wept for David and the life they were supposed to have. She wept for the simple, crushing unfairness of it all. As the evening light faded outside the window, casting long shadows across the room, Clara Miller felt a profound and terrifying loneliness. She had never felt so utterly and completely alone in the dark. While Clara's world was shrinking to the four walls of her silent apartment, another world, one of panoramic city views and polished mahogany, was being shaken to its core. Arthur Kensington, known to Clara only as Art, sat in the back of his chauffeured Maybach, the scent of rich leather, a stark, nauseating contrast to the diner's lingering smell of grease and despair. He had shed the ragged clothes now stuffed in a duffel bag on the floor, and was back in a tailored Brioni suit. But the transformation was only skin deep. Inside he was still the man from Table 7, horrified, ashamed, and powerless. He hadn't intervened. That was the thought that played on a torturous loop in his mind. He, Arthur Kensington, CEO and chairman of Kensington Eateries, Inc., a man whose single word could create or destroy careers, had sat by and watched a good woman be publicly humiliated and fired for showing him a kindness he hadn't experienced in years. He had stayed in character, played the part of the helpless vagrant, because his undercover CEO consultants had told him that intervention would compromise the entire project. "Observe and report, Mr. Kensington. Do not engage." What a fool he'd been. This whole exercise, cooked up by his PR team, was supposed to be a way to reconnect with the company his father had built. "See the front lines, Art," his father had always said. "A company's heart isn't in the boardroom, it's on the diner floor." After his father's death 6 months ago, Arthur, who had been raised on spreadsheets and profit margins, felt a gnawing disconnect from that philosophy. He agreed to the undercover stunt, expecting to find inefficiency, maybe some minor theft, things he could fix with a memo and a new set of policies. Instead, he found Clara. And he found Brenda. He had witnessed firsthand the brutal manifestation of the very corporate culture he had fostered. Brenda wasn't a monster. She was a product. She was the perfect manager by his company's standards. She quoted policy-maximized profit and eliminated inefficiencies. And Clara, with her boundless empathy, was the inefficiency she had eliminated. The car pulled up to the gleaming Kensington Tower, a monument of glass and steel that suddenly felt like a tomb. In his penthouse office on the 80th floor, the city lights spread out below him like a blanket of scattered jewels. He had always found this view inspiring, a symbol of his power and success. Tonight, it just made him feel small and isolated. "Get me Mark Renshaw on the line. Now," he barked at his assistant through the intercom. "And pull the complete employee file for a waitress named Clara Miller from the Golden Spoon Diner on North Clark Street. And while you're at it, get me the file for the manager, Brenda Vance." He paced the length of his office, the plush carpet muffling his angry footsteps. He had seen the fear in Clara's eyes when she pleaded for her job, mentioning her son. He had created a system where a mother's livelihood could be extinguished over 545 falls. The thought was sickening. His assistant buzzed back. "Mr. Renshaw is on line 1, sir, and the files have been sent to your secure tablet." Arthur snatched the phone. "Mark," he said, his voice dangerously calm. "Arthur Kensington. I was reviewing the performance metrics for the North Clark Street Diner. Tell me about the manager, Brenda Vance." Renshaw, clearly caught off guard by a direct call from the CEO, stammered for a moment. "Mr. Kensington, sir, Brenda Vance is an exemplary manager, a real bulldog. She has the highest profit margins in my district. Table turn times are down 15%, and upsells are up 20% since she took over." "And her staff turnover rate?" Arthur asked, his eyes cold. There was a pause. "Well, sir, that is slightly higher than average. But in this industry, slightly higher—" Arthur cut him off, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "I'm looking at the numbers right here, Mark. It's the highest in the entire Midwest region. She churns through employees like they're disposable napkins. Do you reward that?" "Her results speak for themselves, sir," Renshaw said defensively. "She's a bottom-line manager. That's what we've been incentivizing." "We've been incentivizing." The words hit Arthur like a punch to the gut. Renshaw was right. The problem wasn't just Brenda or Mark. The problem was him. "We're going to talk more about your incentive programs tomorrow, Mark. Be in my office at 8 a.m., Arthur said, and hung up before Renshaw could reply. He picked up his tablet and opened Clara Miller's file. It was sparse. Hired 3 years ago. No commendations, no demerits. Just a steady, unremarkable record. He saw her address, her emergency contact information, and a note about her dependent son, Leo. Then he swiped to the next page to her personal information. He saw her last name, Miller, and next to it, the name of her late husband listed as her former next of kin, David Miller. Arthur's blood ran cold. David Miller. The name echoed from the past. He quickly accessed the company's terminated employee archives, his fingers flying across the screen. He typed in the name. One result. David Miller, former line chef, terminated 5 years ago from the Kensington Grill. Arthur remembered the incident vaguely. A regional manager, a different one, had boasted about it in a quarterly meeting, making an example of a chef who had been caught giving away inventory. They had all nodded along, praising the manager's firm hand in protecting company assets. He looked back at Clara's file, then at David's. It was the same address. He stared at the screen, the pieces clicking into place with a horrifying, sickening finality. This wasn't a random encounter. This was a ghost of his company's past, a direct consequence of a culture he had helped build and perpetuate, coming back to haunt him. He had not just witnessed an injustice, he had participated in the second act of a tragedy his own company had written. The view from his window suddenly seemed to mock him. He had built an empire on a foundation of cold, hard numbers, and in the process he had crushed the lives of real people. People like David. People like Clara. A profound, soul-deep shame washed over him, followed by a white-hot resolve. This was not something a memo could fix. This required more than a policy change. This required a reckoning. He buzzed his assistant again, his voice now steady and imbued with a commanding clarity he hadn't felt in years. "Cancel my 8 a.m. meeting with Mark Renshaw," he said. "Clear my entire morning schedule, and have my car ready at 7:30 a.m. I'm going back to the Golden Spoon Diner." The next morning, the Golden Spoon Diner was operating with a nervous, subdued energy. Clara's absence was a palpable void. The staff moved with a hesitant caution, every action performed under the shadow of the previous day's brutal firing. Brenda Vance patrolled the floor like a victorious general, her posture even more rigid than usual, her presence a clear warning to anyone else considering stepping out of line. She was sipping her coffee near the register when the bell above the door jingled. She looked up, a formulaic, "Welcome to the Golden Spoon," dying on her lips. Standing in the doorway was not a regular customer. It was a man in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than her car. He was flanked by two other people, a man and a woman, both impeccably dressed and holding portfolios. The man in the suit was tall, with an air of absolute unshakable authority. His clear blue eyes swept across the diner, taking in every detail. They were the same intelligent blue eyes Brenda had seen in The Ragged Vagrant the day before. Her brain struggled to connect the two images. It was impossible. She blinked, but he was still there now, walking slowly toward her. "Good morning, Aku." The man said, his voice calm but resonant with power. It was the same voice, no longer raspy, but smooth and commanding. "I believe we met yesterday. You, however, met Art. My name is Arthur Kensington." Brenda's coffee cup slipped from her fingers, shattering on the floor and splashing hot liquid across her sensible shoes. She didn't even notice. The name echoed in her ears, Kensington, as in Kensington Eateries. The staff behind the counter froze. The low chatter of the few morning customers died away. Mr. Kensington," she stammered, her face draining of all color. I had no idea. Sir, it's an honor. I didn't recognize you." "That was the point," Arthur said coolly, his gaze unwavering. "I came to see my company from the perspective of a customer, or in my case, from the perspective of a man with nothing. And what I saw was illuminating." He gestured to the two people with him. "This is Elizabeth Shaw, my head of human resources, and this is Michael Chen from my legal department. We're here to conduct an immediate and thorough operational review." He then turned his attention to the rest of the stunned staff. "I would like to assure you all that your jobs are safe. We are here to fix what is broken, not to punish those who have been forced to work within a broken system." His gaze landed back on Brenda, and all warmth vanished from his eyes. "I saw a manager who prioritizes policies over people, who values a $5 transaction over human dignity, and who fires a dedicated, compassionate employee without a moment's hesitation to enforce a soulless rule." Brenda was trembling now, her carefully constructed world collapsing around her. "Sir, I was just following procedure. The company handbook, I'm well aware of what the handbook says." Arthur interrupted, his voice sharp as glass. "I signed off on it, and I have never been more ashamed of my own signature. You did exactly what the system I created taught you to do, and that is the problem." He turned to his HR head. "Elizabeth, I want you to begin one-on-one interviews with every employee here. I want to know everything. Unfiltered, unedited. I want to know about their struggles, their fears, their ideas." Then he pulled out his personal phone. He scrolled through a contact and pressed call. He put it on speaker for Brenda to hear. After 2 rings, a weary, grief-stricken voice answered. "Hello, Clara Miller?" Arthur asked, his own voice softening considerably. There was a pause. "Yes. Who is this? My name is Arthur Kensington. You helped me yesterday at the diner. I was the man at table 7. The silence on the other end of the line was heavy with confusion and disbelief. I don't understand." "I know you don't, and I am so profoundly sorry for what happened to you, more sorry than I can possibly put into words. What you did was the kindest, most decent thing I have seen in a very long time, and you were punished for it. That ends today." He took a deep breath. "Clara, I need to ask you to come back to the diner. Right now. There's something we need to discuss in person. It's important. It's about your husband, David." At the mention of David's name, there was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. Brenda's eyes went wide. She knew about David Miller's firing. It was a legendary story among Kensington managers, an example of how to maintain standards. The full horrifying scope of the situation was finally dawning on her. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, Clara said, her voice no longer weary, but filled with a new sharp and uncertain intensity. Arthur ended the call and looked at Brenda, whose face was now a pale, ghostly white. "The woman you fired yesterday," Arthur said, his voice low and heavy with meaning, "was the widow of a man our company already failed once. You didn't just fire a waitress, you repeated history, and I was there to witness the whole shameful cycle. Now we are all going to sit here and wait for her to arrive, and we are going to begin to make it right." Clara walked into the Golden Spoon diner like a person entering a dream. The 20-minute taxi ride, paid for by the car service Arthur Kensington had sent, had done little to prepare her for the scene inside. Her former co-workers were gathered in small, hushed groups. Her former manager, Brenda Vance, was sitting stiffly at a table, pale and silent. And in the center of it all stood the man from Table 7, no longer Art the Vagrant, but Arthur Kensington, the CEO, his powerful presence commanding the entire room. He turned as she entered, and the look on his face was one of deep, undisguised remorse. He walked toward her, meeting her in the middle of the diner floor. "Clara," he began, his voice filled with an emotion she couldn't quite place. "Thank you for coming. First, before anything else, I want to apologize. What happened to you yesterday was an unforgivable failure on my part, and on the part of the company I lead. There is no excuse." Clara was still trying to process the sheer surreality of it all. You're the CEO," she stated the words, feeling foreign in her mouth. "I am," he confirmed, "and I have been a very poor one. I lost sight of what my father built this company on, people. You reminded me of that, your compassion, your integrity, even when it cost you everything. That is the core of what this business should be." He gestured to an empty booth. "Please, sit with me." Hesitantly, she slid into the booth, and he sat opposite her. For the first time, she wasn't his waitress. They were equals. "When I looked at your employee file," he continued gently, "I found something that stopped me in my tracks. Your husband's name. David Miller. I remembered his case." Clara stiffened old wounds, reopening with a fresh, sharp pain. "You fired him for giving a birthday cake to a man who had nothing." Arthur didn't flinch from her accusatory gaze. He met it head-on. "Yes," he said, his voice thick with regret. "We did. It was a decision made by a regional manager, but I was the CEO. I endorsed the culture that allowed it to happen. A culture that prized a few dollars worth of flour and sugar over a man's dignity and career. I see now with a clarity that sickens me that David's firing wasn't just a mistake. It was a moral failing, a failing that I believe contributed to what happened to him. And for that, I am truly, deeply sorry." Tears welled in Clara's eyes, but this time they were not tears of despair. They were tears of validation of a long-held pain finally being acknowledged. "Clara, I cannot undo the past," Arthur said, leaning forward, his voice earnest. "I cannot bring David back, but I can promise you starting today that his legacy and your act of kindness will become the catalyst for a fundamental change in this entire corporation." He paused, collecting his thoughts. I didn't come here just to offer you your job back. Frankly, you deserve better than that. I am creating a new position, a new department within Kensington Eateries. It's called the Kensington Cares Initiative. Its sole purpose will be to audit and reform our company policies, to implement employee support programs, and to ensure that compassion and empathy are woven into the very fabric of how we do business. We'll establish emergency funds for employees, in crisis overhaul our management training, and create pathways for real feedback from the ground up. He looked at her, his blue eyes filled with a desperate hope. And I want you to run it. I want you to be its first ever director. I don't want someone with a business degree who's never served a plate of food in their life. I want someone who understands the human cost of a bad policy. I want someone with integrity, with courage, and with a heart. I want you, Clara. Clara was speechless, the director of a corporate initiative. It was unfathomable. Me, I'm a waitress. I don't know how to run a department. You know how to be a decent human being, Arthur countered. That's the most important qualification. We will provide you with all the training resources and support you need. A team, an office at headquarters, and a salary that will ensure you and Leo never have to worry about a medical bill or the rent again. I'm not offering you a job, Clara. I'm asking you to be my partner in fixing this company, to help me build a corporation that David would have been proud to work for. Across the room, Brenda Vance watched this exchange, her face a complicated mask of shock, shame, and perhaps for the first time, a glimmer of understanding. Her world of rigid rules and cold metrics had been turned upside down by a single act of kindness she had tried to stamp out. Clara looked at Arthur Kensington, the man she had fed when he was hungry. She thought of Leo, of David, of the endless, exhausting struggle. And for the first time in years, she saw a light at the end of the tunnel. Not just an escape from her circumstances, but a chance to build something better, to give meaning to her own suffering and to David's memory. A slow, tentative smile touched her lips. Okay, she said, her voice clear and steady. Yes, I'll do it. Arthur Kensington let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. It was the beginning of a long road, but it was a start. The Golden Spoon Diner, once the scene of a cruel injustice, had just become the birthplace of a revolution, all because one waitress chose kindness over policy, and one CEO was finally willing to see the human beings behind his bottom line. The story of Clara Miller and Arthur Kensington isn't just about a job lost and a fortune gained. It's a powerful reminder that our true character is revealed not in how we follow the rules, but in how we treat each other, especially when no one is watching. Clara's simple act of kindness, born from her own struggles, created a ripple that didn't just come back to her. It grew into a tidal wave of change that reformed an entire company. It proves that one person armed with empathy can be more powerful than the most rigid corporate policy. Her story teaches us that true strength lies in compassion, and that sometimes the biggest risks lead to the most profound rewards. What seems like a thankless sacrifice could be the very thing that changes everything. If Clara's incredible journey moved you, please give this video a thumbs up to spread the message of kindness. Don't forget to share it with someone who might need to hear it. And for more real-life stories that will inspire and amaze you, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Thank you for listening.